Welcome, Laurie and Marty. Nice to virtually meet you both on this nice Friday afternoon.
Nice to meet you too, and thank you very much for having us.
Of
Yeah, great.
course. Thank you. So I'm gonna be speaking with you today because there's a new initiative that is coming from your theater production company, Laurie, Odyssey Theatre,
Yes.
which is The Other Path. But before we get into this cool initiative, maybe each of you can talk a little bit about yourselves, a little bit of introduction so folks can understand what your background is and what your work is.
Okay. Did you want to go ahead, Marty?
Sure.
Sure. I'm Marty Chan. I am a kids author and playwright. I've been writing for a very long time. I've been writing for over 20 years. I think in theater, most people would recognize either my play The Bone House or Mom, Dad, I'm Living with a White Girl.
Mhm.
And in kids fiction, I'm known for the Marty Chan mystery series and my recent thriller, The Haunted Hospital.
Nice.
So I sort of jump all over the map in terms of what I write, and that's basically because I have a very short attention span.
Perfect.
I'm Laurie Steve. I'm the artistic director of Odyssey Theatre, which is a theater that practices mask, physical theater in Ottawa. And I got to know Marty not through any of the things he talked about, but through a play that I read that he wrote called The Forbidden Phoenix, about a myth about the Monkey King, and that paralleled that myth and wove in and out of, and I'm going to say this all wrong, but a story about early Chinese people that came to Canada. And it was really moving. And so when I wanted to do this series, I reached out to see if he might be interested in doing something with me.
Very nice. So what was that like, Marty, to be to sort of have your work inspire some other potential new ways of telling stories? So I guess to set it up for people, The Other Path is going to be a drama series, but is audio drama, right?
It's an audio drama series that drops on October 5th. And we release new episodes and new plays through the fall. And it's the authors that are involved in this started with folktale. And I said, find a folktale from somewhere in the world and make a contemporary play out of that for an audience. And all 5 of the writers that I've been working with each went in a different direction, and yet they're all kind of haunted, eerie, and I said touched by comedy. And so you get Marty, which we would have to say is a quite macabre comedy with a realistic setting, to other plays that just have a hint of comedy in them.
So what was that like, Marty, when you got this sort of call of, I read a work of yours and now we want to try this other way of sharing stories and to new audiences, perhaps?
It's fantastic. Any opportunity to try a new form of expression is something that excites me as a writer. So when Laurie was talking about The Forbidden Phoenix, that was a mashup of Chinese opera and North American musical theater, which to my recollection, nobody that I knew in North America had attempted something like that. And so it was sort of breaking new ground and going, all right, I have no idea. There's no template for this, but let's try to create one. And the same thing with The Other Path. There's no template for this, where you're taking, classic or not so classic folk tales and adapting them for the ear and for a modern day audience. And to me, that was the thing that got me excited, was this notion of tackling something that was traditional in terms of the folktale, but expressing it for a contemporary audience, which, oftentimes when you think about folktales, you're thinking, oh, it's for kids or it's something in the past. And if you're thinking about modern day audiences, you're thinking, how can I bring something that might be, mistakenly construed as something that's designed for kids and make it relevant for young adult or adult listeners? And to me, that challenge was really exciting, and that's why I wanted to take it on.
Yeah, no, it sounds really exciting. I mean, I'm a fan of any storytelling because I have been since I was a child. So, Laurie, I was wondering, what was that process like for you to decide, how many stories and who these writers or authors would be the ones that kind of helped make this come true?
Well, I I had originally envisioned, I mean, really, we have to be honest. I had originally envisioned this podcast series would kind of take 6 months and we could do, 6 to 8 pieces.
Mm,
And actually, it took 2 years. And thank goodness I only had 5 pieces because that
right.
was full time. And now we're, very excited about releasing it. In terms of how I came across the writers, I thought, I don't know why. I guess because of digital, I felt that this was an opportunity not only just to reach audiences across Canada, but I felt like, if we're working digitally for much of this project, I could reach artists across Canada. And so I started reading far and wide, anything to any writers in fantasy, folklore, and drama who
Right.
had shown a passion. I mean, it might not be their full-time thing, but who had shown a passion for taking something mythical or folkloric and doing something interesting now with it. And so in each case, the writers that I approached, it's because I read something that really moved me and
Mhm.
really made me go, this person has a sense, because it's not everybody that has a sense of how you can take something that's a myth or a folk tale and make it relevant. So they had that passion for myth or folk tale, and they also had something burning that they wanted to say,
Mhm.
contribute to the discussion now.
It's interesting because I know that folk tales can sort of be used to tackle very important topics or themes or help us sort of explain certain things that happen throughout life. Maybe Marty, as a writer, how do you use folk tales to address some of the topics that you kind of want to bring forth for audiences today?
Well, when I'm thinking about a folktale, oftentimes what I'm thinking about is I shouldn't say lesson, but what theme does it try to illustrate? Because I think one of the pitfalls of tackling folktales is that oftentimes people will think about the message, the lesson, or the theme
Mhm.
before they think about the story. And
Right.
the reason why folktales are effective is because in the story, you are able to lift out the theme or the message from the illustration of what the story is, the action of the story.
Mhm.
And oftentimes we get sort of the folktales get knocked because of, you think about Aesop's fable, which
Mm.
usually ends with the parent going, and the moral of the story is, as if you didn't get it. But the great thing about a folktale is the story actually illustrates that theme, and
Mhm.
it encourages the listener or the reader to actually sort of dig into it and go, okay, what is the message? What is the theme of this through the action of what happens with the characters? So
Mhm.
keeping that in mind, when I tackled the adaptation of the folktale, I did know what kind of theme or message I wanted to get across,
Mhm.
but then I had to dig down deeper and go, okay, these are real characters, these are real people in the story. What
Right.
happens in their lives and what decisions do they make that will eventually illustrate the theme that I'm trying to get across? And in this case, I don't want to give away too
I
much of
know,
the
me
story.
either,
That's
me
why
either.
I'm skirting the edge of it. Um,
Yeah.
but the idea is, in a modern day world where we're talking about, the life circumstances, in particular where I'm from Alberta, which
Mhm.
has been on a roller coaster ride of booms and busts in terms of the oil and gas industry.
Yes.
And in the time of plenty, people are going out and buying quads and giant trucks with little truck nuts on them. If you're from Alberta, you know what I'm talking about. But they're kind of like the fuzzy dice that you hang off of rearview
Yes.
mirrors. But
Mhm.
it's more for people who have big trucks and, and nothing else to do with their lives.
Mhm.
And so they enjoy the life of plenty. And then what happens is when we hit the bust, people panic and they're worried about where the next paycheck is going to come from. And it brings out maybe something that existed in certain people before, but with the stress of not having enough money, it sort of brings more of the ugliness to the surface in terms of
Mhm.
desperation, in terms of what people would want to do to sort of continue the lifestyle that they had before. And sometimes people turn to a life of crime, and I wanted to sort of capture that in a way that was partly dark, partly funny, and the premise of Double Trouble, my podcast, is two people discover a magic tub that allows them to multiply whatever they put in the tub, and of course, if you think about what you would want to multiply if you're desperate for money, it gives you a little idea of sort of what unfolds in the story. And of course, things go sideways when greed takes over, and we see what lengths the characters will go to accumulate wealth.
For sure. And it's relatable, right? In terms of
I
we
think
can
everybody.
translate a lot of this to sort of our own everyday ups and downs. Sorry, Laurie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's it. Marty did a good job of kind of skirting around, giving away too much on that. But I understand that this comes from what when I read the folktale that Marty proposed, I'm going, well, this is a very lovely, sweet lovely, sweet, gentle folktale about this man who finds something that creates doubles and confusion with him and his wife. And so there's a long way from the original folktale to like that hit Marty about what he wanted to do with it, but a long way from that to what Marty ultimately created.
For sure.
So it's and I think that's the case with most of the folktales. They hit the writer, and the writer went, whoa, I know what I want to do with this. I know what I want to say with this. And they say it, but there's quite a transition from the original tale to the final play, and the set in the now.
For sure.
I think that's one of the joys of adaptation, right? If you can take a source material and play around with it, if you can retain the core in terms of its theme or message, and then in this case we had to adapt it to a contemporary audience, it allows you to go into a lot of different directions, but you can still keep the anchor of, oh yeah, I can see where the threads of the original source material is. And just as a small tangent, I mean, it's one of the things that I know when people like love a book and then they go see the movie adaptation of it, they go, oh, it's nothing like the book I read. But part of that is in adapting from one medium to another, you have to make certain concessions, or you have to understand the realities of, let's say, a visual medium in the case of a movie, or in this case, we're thinking about an oral medium where you know that you have to write a story for the ear as opposed to the eye.
Yeah, which opens it up for more imagination too, right? It kind of brings us back to that story time, I mean, I still like it, but that we were used to when we were younger. So it's nice and interesting to hear Laurie say that, the initial pitch, if you will, was one thing, and then all of the podcast stories kind of morphed into something else as they were being produced. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that production side, because you mentioned, I think a lot of us think podcasts might be like, an idea comes up and then, it might not take that long. And I know I have some friends that work in production of podcasts. It is a lot of work. So how was it that you worked with the team behind the scenes as an author, Marty and Laurie, I guess, whether it was a group effort? What was that like?
From my point of view, it was really easy, because all I had to do was
here you go.
write this script and go, okay, you figure out how to make this world come to life, which they did a fabulous job of. I remember sitting in on the read through and the rehearsals as they were piecing things together, and the actors were great. But the thing that was really cool is how the production team sort of translated what was on the page and thinking, okay, so we need a sound effect here to sort of get across a certain moment, right? And I love the fact that they were able to sort of dial deep down and go, if the audience only has the sound to go on, is the sound that's suggested in the script clear enough for the listener to get? And they would push me and say, okay, no, we need this at this moment, or we need this to really clarify for the audience. And it's one of those things with radio dramas. Yes, you're playing with imagination, but you have to plant the right seeds in order for the audience to go, oh, I know what that is. And if you don't have the right seed, then they can go off into a tangent and go, I think that was an elephant in the room. So you have to be really conscious with your sound design choices. And that's the thing that I loved about the process, was just to see how everyone invested their skills and talents into putting everything together.
And what about for you, Laurie?
Once I got the writers on board, I had told the writers there would be a pitch and, a couple of drafts. And in most cases, it was somewhere between 6 and 8 drafts that the poor souls had to go through. And all the while I was learning about writing for audio drama. And we had two-day workshops with the cast at various points through that. And this was all during COVID. So this was all done online.
Right.
And that was very fruitful. And then we were playing around a little bit with music and sound. Sometimes we found a good direction. Sometimes we quite didn't at that point. And then we did a rehearsal. We got the final scripts. We did a rehearsal, and we had for each of the plays 1 full day in studio with all the actors. Live, COVID tested in a studio together and recorded. One of the exciting things about audio drama as opposed to live theater is you never know what's going to happen any night in live theater. But in audio drama, you get to record little bits again and again and again and again and choose the best takes. And then there it is. It's kind of set, sort of. And so from that point, I started to really work with the music and sound designers.
Right.
Normally in theater, you work with the designers, and it's kind of a collaborative process all the way up to opening night. But in this medium, you really work. They say, no, we'll look at it after you've done the recording, and they really want answers. And you have to be I had to dig deep, because they would say, okay, these steps, are they going right to left or left to right? What kind of shoes are they wearing? What kind of floor are they on? How many steps? How hard do you want those knocks on the door?
Exactly.
And what kind of seagulls are in the distance? Hungry seagulls, or, and it's, all kind of questions thrust at me. And that took 6 months for 5 pieces of me working back and forth with people. And we're just talking sound. We're just talking the soundscapes that create the feeling of a space, whether it's inside a car with the window shut, with the door open, how far in the distance is the traffic, or whether it's on a cliff by an ocean. So I ultimately had to stage the whole thing on paper the way I would stage it for the theater, and then translate that into how we're going to get that 3D soundscape and that movement that I can imagine on audio.
Yes.
And it meant teaching actors how to do microphone technique, moving closer to the microphone, further away, and shouting off, so that we would get that. And then a lot of work with the sound designer afterwards with stereo effects, enhancing all the sounds. So it was, there were a lot of people involved, and it went through various phases to get to where we got to. So it was a big group effort.
It sounds really exciting. Was it the same cast for each of the audio stories?
No.
Oh, okay.
There were a number of actors that played in a couple. It was a team of 15. And
nice.
Each drama had 4 or maybe 5 actors playing 4 or 5 or 8 or 9 roles. So basically we could fit 4 comfortably in the studio. It's quite a large recording studio to
At a
get
given
4
time,
in.
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it
So,
makes me think about it makes me think about the skill sets of your
mhm,
actors, right? Because if you were doing this as a live play, right, you would be casting, looking for different skill sets, right? Like in terms of like, can you portray the character? Do they look the right part? And now, like when you're thinking about doing something that's a podcast or a radio drama, you're
mhm.
thinking, is the quality of their voice enough that they can play multiple characters without the audience thinking, oh, it's the same person? And my question, if I can throw a question at Laurie,
Of
is
course.
like, how hard was it to make sure
Mhm.
that characters sounded different if they were played by the same actor?
Well, that was, that was a kind of criteria in the auditions. In the auditions, we did auditions by Zoom, and I turned off my camera and I just listened to their voices. And some actors are really gifted at a particular character, and that's good because they can only some plays can only take, one actor playing that one character. But I had to look for the actors that can do different voices. And that kind of works with what Odyssey does, because we play masks, and an
Yes.
actor who can play, you often has to play 3 different masks, has to be
Mhm.
good at creating different characters. And the other thing that was really, I wanted this to be a project that gave actors in my field of mask movement, physical theater, I wanted it to be an opportunity for them to work during the pandemic and to give them experience doing radio work, audio drama. But what was really cool was that the actors who are good with physical manipulation of props were really good at mic technique, because they could, the way that they might use a prop for various things in a show was they could then see, oh, okay, I can the mic became a prop for them, and they could manipulate that and their voice to get certain
Mhm.
things. So yeah, it was neat.
That's really cool. I can almost even visualize this because I've seen masks as well, right? Where the movement will lead to specific kind of energy, and I assume that's also how they were using the mic on studio, right? Like the energy of that character and what they were embodying, I suppose.
That's true, because actors do better in a sound studio if their voice is coming through their body. So if
Mhm.
they're imagining that if they're supposed to be walking along the edge of a hillside,
Mhm.
then actors that have that physical work, they're constantly kind of moving, and
Mhm.
you can get that feeling out of the voice that's coming from a movement in the body.
Of course. So I'm curious, not to give away much because I don't want to give away. I'm waiting for things to drop online so people can hear the different stories. But Marty, once you've heard, your story now in audio form, what was that like for you?
It's wonderful because I think when you're as a writer, especially if you're writing something that's meant to be performed,
Hmm.
in your mind, in your ear in this case, you have a certain sound or a certain way that the character is going to speak, and you know what the rhythms are. And then, of course, when you bring in the actors, they'll infuse that character with their rhythm, and they'll try to capture the core of the character, but the rhythm
Yes.
just might be slightly different than what you had in your brain. And that's great because I'm a terrible actor. So there's no way everyone should speak exactly the way the way that I envision my characters, because they'd all sound like Marty Chan. Uh, and so when you hear your work for the very first time, it's a surprise. It's a
Mhm.
delightful surprise where it's like one of those moments. I guess the best analogy I can give is let's say you buy a birthday or a Christmas present for yourself, right? So you know what you've bought, but you wrap it up and you put it aside for the big event. And maybe you've forgotten what the present was, and you're looking at the box and you're going, oh, what's that box doing there? And then when you open it, you get that delight where you go, oh, this is fantastic. This is something that I knew I was supposed to get, but I forgot about it. And now it's like I've discovered it all over again. And I find that when I listen to anything that's performed, I get that same moment, that same thrill, the joy of discovering something that I knew was there because I'd written the script, but I discovered it in a brand new way with the actors interpreting it in a new way. And in this case, with our director and designers, just bringing it to life. And to me, it was like a opening my birthday present or Christmas present for the second time.
That's a great analogy. And was that the same or similar for you, Laurie? Because now I'm assuming you've probably sneak peeked most of them, right?
Oh, I've heard all of them. I've heard all of them in infinite detail at this point. But I too, when the actors, you know, when I'm reading the script and thinking about it, I have one idea of how it will sound. But when the actors come, they're all champions of their own characters. So they're not going to serve the playwright. They're not going to serve the director. They're serving their characters, and they bring that kind of energy to it. So that is definitely eye-opening. And then after the production, after the recording session, you go through what I now know the meaning of post-production hell.
Yes.
So you go through it again and again and again and again, and you think you think you'll never see the end of that, but then suddenly you listen to it at the end and you go, oh wow, that's really cool when you put all the elements together. So I'm hoping all the people that worked on various components will be able to get that great feeling when they hear it.
I'm sure they will. So tell me about the format again. It's going to be a weekly release starting next week. Is that how it
Every
works?
2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
We start on October 5th, next Wednesday, and every 2 weeks we release a new episode until I think it goes into December 4th.
Very nice.
And we have a website, www.theotherpath.ca, and there's lots of things to explore. You can meet all the artists on that website and read stuff about the series. Oh, and you can listen to the podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
Okay, so that was going to be my next question, if it was available only through the website or the usuals for podcast platforms.
Spotify, Apple, the works.
Excellent. And Marty, thank you so much also for explaining about your process in writing this story. Where can people find your work? I know you're also an educator. I know you keep busy. How do we find you online so that I make sure that people know how to find your work?
You can find me at my website, which is martychan.com. And I also have a YouTube channel where I actually put up writing tips to help young writers become better at their craft, and you can find my YouTube channel at Marty Chan Author. So those are 2 places where you can find me.
Excellent. I'll be sure to plug these 2 sites on my piece. And thank you both so much. I mean, I could ask more questions, but I think I'm going to wait until I hear the pieces and then maybe send some questions back.
Excellent.
Lovely to meet you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. And nice to see you, Marty.
Good to see you, Laurie.
Yeah.
Thank you.